Welcome to RCast, the official podcast to the RChain Cooperative. RChain is a complete, concurrent blockchain platform designed for maximum efficiency at minimal computational and environmental costs by utilizing proof of stake. Beyond our platform, our investment partner, Reflective Ventures, funds organizations that are working within our core mission statement to create a better world by enabling social coordination in robust, secure, and scalable ways. I'm Derek Barris, the Director of Content for RChain. Each week on RCast, I'll be talking with the founders of our portfolio companies, as well as co-op members, staff, and other figures in the RChain ecosystem about the most pressing issues in blockchain today. Please check out rchain.coop to learn more about the platform, our community, validator sale, and information on becoming a member. While Ethereum Classic developers claim yesterday's selfish mining was not a 51% attack, Coinbase is reporting that nearly $500,000 worth of Ethereum Classic was double spent. Another week, another hack. We know the cryptocurrency market is particularly vulnerable to such attacks given the lack of regulations and oversight. Yet even in our traditional digital lives, which are supposed to be more tightly governed, no week passes without news of another or many hacks compromising our security, data, and identity. In fact, we've become numb to these reports until the hack affects us personally. Unfortunately, most of us don't even know how or if our information has placed us in compromising situations. Recovering stolen money can prove impossible, even if done so through your bank, which is supposed to have safeguards in place. Add in the marketing and political blitzes pieced together from stolen data, and we're all effectively swimming in a sea of misinformation crafted by shady agents, fomenting distrust in the system and each other. Blockchain was created in part to address the problems of centralization, but we are nowhere near an end. Just last week, TechCrunch predicted that 2019 will be worse than last year. And last month, Splash Data reported on the worst passwords of 2018. The top 5 are 123456, password, meaning the word password, 123456789, 1234567 and 12345. The fact that anyone uses these show how little many of us take our security. Rubica, one of RChain's portfolio companies, was founded by CEO Francis Dewing, who built and directs the team's core operations, and President Roderick Jones, whose previous professions include focusing on international terrorism with Scotland Yard. The Rubica team has worked with the NSA, the US Navy, the Pentagon, and the White House. The company focuses on detecting threats before they strike through a unique suite of services that you can find at Rubica.com. During our talk, we discussed the need for security and privacy in an age where too many people pay too little attention to it. As Francis says, security is the one thing you should never sacrifice. We also discussed the dangers of giving up access to your data for free services, consumer privacy laws, such as the upcoming law that's supposed to take effect in California at the end of 2019, and whether or not blockchain is really secure and the problems that we are encountering with it. As mentioned, Rubica offers a threat detection service as well as a consumer insurance program that's pretty unique in terms of scope and range for regular people like you or myself. Or maybe you're not a regular person and I'm just making an assumption. But I know that I don't have any high-level government clearance, so these sorts of programs would work for me. As a special offer to the RChain community and this podcast, Rubica is offering a 50% off of the company's 2 most popular plans, an individual plan and a family plan, that you can find by checking out our blog at blog.rchain.coop and clicking on the podcast episode. The link is at the bottom there. I'm reading Tim Ferriss's latest book, Tools of Titans, and he has a quote from Mark Goodman, who is the head of the Future Crimes Institute, who works with security and risk implications of emerging technologies. And he was telling Tim the worst advice that he hears, and it's this. People thinking, if you have nothing to hide, then you don't have to worry about privacy, and that we must sacrifice our privacy in order to have security.
Wow, people say that?
That's kind of funny. I agree with Mark. Mark and Tim are both friends of mine, so I've probably had that conversation with them. But that isn't true. You can have privacy and security. They're not mutually exclusive, and actually, that's kind of ties in with the blockchain community and why we actually got interested in that technology in the first place. Not necessarily that we were going to build on blockchain. I think the applications for cybersecurity are yet to be determined, but certainly the idea that distributed networks provide more security than centralized networks is pretty obvious to most people. Centralizing all of your data in a big tech company is likely to be insecure. That's the history of the world, and that's why the internet was invented in the first place, is to create lots of distributed nodes. So as kind of security, I loathe to use the word experts, but certainly security observers, that's why we became interested in the technology and the movement. I would disagree with this statement.
Well, I think also, just to add one point on that, there is, in this era where unfortunately we have a lack of privacy, historically and over the last few years, people kind of, whether it's in an informed way or not, being willing to give up their privacy for access to free services or whatnot. The thing that is true is you can still have security when there's no privacy. Security is the one thing that you should never sacrifice, and that it is, what I tell people is, it's easy to be disheartened by all of the stuff in the news about how much of our data is exposed, and feeling like you can't engage with the digital world without relinquishing your data. But the truth is that even if somebody knows my social security number and my mother's maiden name and has my passwords, I can still be secure. And that's kind of how we're trying to help teach and inform people, is to make them, more informed consumers of their digital world so that they can be secure and make those choices about security and privacy, and not feel like the choice is either to stick your head in the sand or disconnect from the internet altogether.
So what are some of the tips that you would give people? The first part of the question of the sentence from Goodman was, if you have nothing to hide, then you don't have to worry about privacy. And that I have heard a lot of people say, whereas the privacy security, I agree. I don't hear that as much, but that first part I've heard a number of people say, they're just like, well, I'm an open book. It's all good, which I don't believe. But besides that, so what tips would you give, or why would you tell people that it's important to pay attention to their privacy and their security?
Well, I think people say that in the security context as well. They'll say, I'm not a celebrity, I'm not on Facebook, I don't bank online, so I'm not at risk because nobody knows who I am. And that's just a total misunderstanding of cybercrime and cybersecurity. It's not a hacker in a hoodie in a basement going after you specifically. It's global organized crime with a very financially motivated agenda. And you're just another person on that list that could potentially be targeted to make them $1, So it's not about whether you're a celebrity in the news, it's whether your information is exposed, which all of ours is, and whether you're a juicy target that's worth their time and effort to try and compromise.
Yeah, the other thing is that statement assumes that we don't live in a highly networked environment. So it's missing an enormous part of what 2019 looks like. You know someone and interacts with someone online, whether you have children, work in a business or whatever, it is highly unlikely you are not going to be communicating with someone online. So you being cavalier and you being utterly an open book will let cyber criminals into your network. That is the nature of interconnected and networked crime in 2019.
In terms of being cavalier about, I have nothing to hide, so what, I don't care about my privacy. I think Cambridge Analytica is the prime example. But even if you aren't doing anything nefarious, that information about you can still be used to manipulate you and to develop profiles on you, to whether that's for advertising or for social engineering or for, political manipulations. So yeah, I agree with Roderick. I'm frankly surprised that people still have that view given everything that's happened in the last few months.
Well, I feel like sometimes if you're not affected personally, it doesn't really have an emotional resonance that makes you want to change things. So, for example, right now I'm looking out my home office window, and 2 blocks over is the entrance to Sony Studios in Los Angeles, and I can see it from here. And my wife was a contractor for them for some jobs, so her data was likely stolen when that hack occurred on Sony. Nothing has come of it as far as we know. But what are some real dangers besides, everyone knows about the credit card. I've had my credit card's number stolen at least 3 times. I've had to cancel now. What are some of the other dangers that people might not realize that those simple, seemingly benign hacks really can do to them?
Yeah, I mean, so just to use a recent example, like the Marriott hack. So that one's easy to think, okay, well, they just got my credit card number. I'll just change that. And, maybe there's some personal information, address, date of birth, whatever. That's just the tip of the iceberg, because really what's happening is when all these big hacks happen, that data is now available to the highest bidder on the dark web, as well as the data from other hacks. And those can all be kind of collated together and made into full profiles on individuals that can be used in spear phishing or other sorts of attacks that specifically target you. So for example, information, let's take the Equifax hack, the Sony hack, et cetera. And let's say you not only your wife's information, but information about, her family members, places where she's lived, places that she's shopped, things about her life and habits and the people around her. You could craft a really convincing phishing or social engineering attack to get her to click on something, download something, give up information that ultimately leads to whether it's money leaving a bank account or infiltration of other networks or people within her world. And some of that, to your point, isn't immediate. It's easy to hear something in the news, and if nothing happens immediately, forget about it. But the reality is that a lot of these cybercrime is not instantaneous, even though it feels that way when the end event happens. It's a chain of a dozen different steps that take anywhere from a number of days to a number of months to effectuate. And that's why kind of one of the things we try to educate on and provide solutions for is ongoing cybersecurity and monitoring and awareness, because it's not a kind of one-time thing. This is an ongoing and very kind of strategic game.
Yeah, I'd say the other thing as well is we're moving into an era now in cybercrime where all that glitters is not gold. And what I mean by that is for the longest time, it's been essentially a financial crime. More and more so, it's going after other kinds of digital property. And that's obviously near and dear to the heart of people in the blockchain and cryptocurrency community. Those were digital assets that have been stolen or pilfered in sort of cybercrime. But 2018 saw the arrival of Hive, which was basically just stealing people's CPU power to mine coins. These aren't financial, like strictly traditional financial crimes. So we're just on that tipping point now of moving into an era where cybercrime is taking a big financial toll on people, but it's also moving into the rest of their digital lives. And I think 2019 is going to see a lot more of that.
Well, I follow your feed on Twitter. It's one of my favorite of all the companies that are building on our chain. But usually it's not good news, but I think it's important news. And you shared I don't know who does your social media, but you shared a TechCrunch article today from the security editor of TechCrunch, Nick Whitaker, and he was saying that it doesn't look good for 2019. There'll be more breaches and hacks. What specifically can you talk about? So someone signs up for Rubica and pays for the program. What are you offering at different levels, and why would people want to use your service?
Yeah, so really what we set out to do at Rubica is to bring advanced cyber protection capabilities to individuals in a way specifically built for them rather than large corporations. And in a nutshell, we're trying to protect you no matter what device you're on, no matter what network you're on, no matter what you're doing online, not just based on one network or interaction, the internet. And how we do that is through a very simple download of our software on all of your devices. You're able to connect securely to the internet anywhere in the world, do whatever you do online, and you can automatically be protected from known threats, we automatically block everything from crypto mining threats to phishing, malware, etc. But we also have a cyber operations team that is monitoring the traffic to and from your device for anomalies and indicators of compromise. So that lets us stay ahead of emerging threats and detect even kind of the hidden and invisible and new threats that are emerging every single day. And I think, this is something that enterprise cybersecurity has known for a long time, that really the only way, because cyber crime is iterating and innovating so rapidly, you can't just rely on blocking known threats, and you can't rely on purely kind of signature-based or retroactive technology to protect. It has to be ongoing intrusion detection, prevention, mitigation, response. And so basically what we're doing is bringing that capability to individuals in a way that's consumable to them and kind of wrapped around with this very human service to make it able to be integrated in a normal person's life without needing like a technical degree to consume this kind of security.
And you also are offering an insurance program, which I believe when I read about it was new for consumers, correct?
Yeah, so our partner, Pure Insurance, was the first to offer private cyber insurance. So you can buy up to $1 million of personal cybersecurity coverage, and covers anything from loss of real money, like a wire transfer fraud, through to identity theft, etc. But you have to have Rubica as your remediating proactive protection for that. So that's very unique. I know there are some other insurance companies that have offered some cybersecurity coverage, but not up to the $1 million level, and not with kind of the proactive protections that Rubica provides.
Because I've read it's very difficult for people who have, obviously with cryptocurrency, we know there really is no legal recourse for people who have their wallets hacked. But even for more traditional methods, you could say in the digital world at least, that people have a really hard time getting their assets back. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. I think that's the thing that is most shocking to people, is that, you lose money in a fraudulent wire transfer with a bank. Most of the time, the bank is not only are they not liable to refund you that money, but that money is almost nearly impossible to get back. Unless they catch the wire before it goes overseas, nobody gets that back for you. And that's because most of the time that those attacks are not because of a failure on the bank's part. Email was compromised, or their credentials were compromised, and it was a kind of a failure on their personal security. And so the bank is not liable for that. And similarly, you have a hot wallet on your phone. If your phone is compromised, or the internet connection you're using to make that transfer, there's nobody who gets that back for you either.
In that TechCrunch article, Nick had also talked about the California consumer privacy law that's going to be passing at the end of this year, which is going to make the tech companies more liable for explaining what they're doing. And I know the companies have been fighting it and they're lobbying against it. But how do you feel, especially Roderick, I know you've had some history working with governments. Is our government doing enough, either at the states or at the federal level, to ensure the privacy of citizens?
I mean, that's a pretty easy answer. No. I can expand, but, the new Data Privacy Protection Acts that obviously it's modeled off the work that's happened in Europe, which is going to hold tech companies responsible for privacy breaches and actually should, over time, increase security, but we'll see if it passes. We'll see if it comes into force in California, given the enormous lobbying power of the companies. But government isn't doing anything proactively to help consumers, and I think that it was something fundamentally left out of the initial promise of the internet in the 90s. Consumer protection was not built into it, and that is why we are where we are. And until that changes, we're going to be in this kind of Wild West state. Frankly, there isn't a cyber police. There isn't anybody you can call if you've been hacked. There's an opportunity, I think, for state governments to not just do a privacy law that California is obviously doing, but actually offer help and support to consumers in their states as well. And I think states are probably more likely to do it than the federal government right now. The federal government draws a very clear line about what it's responsible for, and that's the military assets of the United States and sort of federal departments, and not the citizens in the cyberspace.
I think as consumers, though, we do have some power to help influence public policy in terms of deciding where we put our spending dollar. And money talks in terms of if you're the buyer and you are actually asking questions about, before I buy this product or give you my data or use this service, I want to know what you're doing with my data, and I'm willing to say I'm not going to use your service or your product if you're not abiding by best practices. If we start doing that more, things will change rapidly. Technical protections aside, in terms of what Rubica does, we're also trying to educate people in how to make those decisions for themselves to kind of affect change, or at least protect themselves as they're making those buying decisions.
The education aspect is so important. Neurologically, humans are wired to default to the easiest possible route. So whatever can be the least amount of clicks on their phone for a service is usually what they're going to choose. And I feel that a lot of the privacy was lost in that process because companies made it so easy and the algorithms were hidden, so they didn't really know what was going on. To your point, Roderick, George Gilder in his book Life After Google says any tech company that does not take security as the first concern is bound for failure. And he specifically cites Google as being bound for failure, which seems impossible at this moment, but how many other companies have fallen. But what do you think it's going to take to replace these companies, or at least to change the public mindset to get off of some of the platforms that are on and onto more secure platforms, or use services that will integrate with those platforms to make them more secure?
I mean, I think that's a massive question, but I think you can start to see the slowdown, particularly in the use of Facebook. I don't obviously have access to their internal figures, but if you look at, I was fortunate enough to be in Berlin last year, and when you look, I think I probably sat through a few sessions, and there were probably 50 startups in the room presenting, and they were all around privacy and security, but really skewed towards privacy. So you can see that the next, there's definitely an argument to be said that the next gen, I mean, there's a reason why blockchain became so interesting. It was a reaction. Obviously, crypto mania drove it, but also it's a reaction to centralization of data and services. And there's a reason why the European Union is reacting against American tech companies. It is the same reaction against centralization of data and individuals' data. Why should Germany give all of that data, which is a valuable resource, to the United States and the United States companies to use for them? So I think there's a general global reaction that's starting to move, and I think a lot of innovation is moving into security and privacy companies, and we happen to be one of those sitting in a really interesting space right now, and that's why we founded the company, frankly.
Not to get into politics too much, but I feel even Elizabeth Warren announcing her exploratory committee for presidency, I mean, she leads with this, right? The consumer privacy protection and all of that. To catch up with European nations that are doing it, I would hope that our federal government, regardless of the makeup, will start to take it more seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a step change between the Obama administration and the Trump administration just on cyber policy. The Obama administration had a commission of experts that reported back, and it had 5 main tranches of report. One of them was solely about how to secure America and what to do in cybersecurity moving forward, and there was an enormous section based on consumer protection. When the Trump administration came in, they didn't take up that report, and they introduced their own, which was long awaited, and it actually focused more on enforcement, again protecting the central parts of the American governmental system, the federal and military services. That Trump administration is actually remarkably not unusual in that. That's been a sort of standard policy forever, and it was, I think, the Obama administration just went and asked tech companies and other experts and came up with the answer that, oh yeah, in order to secure everything, we need to start looking at consumers as well. So I think, we're on the right side of history in trying to protect consumers. And I think that's why we started when we were building Rubica, building this advanced service, but we are the first company that's offering this a very advanced service down at a price that's affordable for consumers in a significant way.
The promise of blockchain is security and scalability. I mean, those are the two things that need to be locked in before there's mass adoption and platforms like RChain and others can really launch. We're all a work in progress in that sense. But do you see any dangers from what you know of blockchain right now where security can be compromised?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the theft in the space, it's quite incredible. And I mean, it's largely happened large holders and the exchange level. But if you look at the NEM hack in Japan, I mean, I think $220 million walked out the door in less than an hour. None of it ever recovered. I mean, that's a significant theft by anyone's measure. And I think there's two things going on, or two or three things, but partly there's an idea of the actual consumers in the kind of blockchain crypto space assume that it's secure, and it isn't. If you have obviously you need a wallet to hold tokens, or actually you're going to have some software to interact with a blockchain. But if you don't have security on your device, on the underlying hardware, you can be compromised. You can lose those tokens or lose control of some of those services. And I think that is again why we became very interested in the blockchain community, because we saw this tremendous vulnerability, because the downside risk is absolute. Once you lose the token, it's gone forever. But there was very little focus on the security of the machines that you were actually holding the wallets on. And so it was a natural marriage for us there.
Well, and a lot of it is it's really just traditional cybersecurity, right? It's like you may be a blockchain company, you might be a crypto exchange, you might be a crypto holder, but if your network's not secure, if your devices that you're using to access those assets aren't secure, and if your protocols and accounts aren't secure, then you're not secure. So it's unfortunately we see the breakdown in security in the blockchain world, very similar to the traditional financial services sector. It's just
But what we've done specifically on our side as well is when we've seen advanced malware or phishing links, we've written the ability to stop those things into our security stack, so that we do have quite, as far as I'm aware, quite unique ability to stop some of the main attacks that come against crypto users. So that's a good reason to use us, and again why we were found by the community, because we can block some of these things coming onto your devices.